My name is Nora Evans. I'm 35. There is a particular domestic humility I have learned to wear like a sweater, soft at the edges, fully functional, with a missing button I never quite get around to sewing. I teach evenings at the community college. By day, I grade essays and make space for students who text me at midnight with panic over a concept I once loved, enough to make the board glow with explanation. I know the names of the neighborhood baristas, the exact sound my daughter June makes when she pretends to snore, and I can assemble a fort out of blankets that will withstand a small meteor shower of stuffed animals. My boyfriend Evan keeps his patience in the pocket of his jacket and his loyalty in the quiet way he folds laundry. We have two small people who tell the story of our life: Max, 8, who sorts rocks the way other kids sort marbles, and June, 5, who believes with Christian conviction that every dog is named Kevin. My older sister Tessa is a different weather system. She is a marketing director who posts her life in angles that make people lean forward. Travel photos that promise jet lag and brasiers of sunlight, twins whose metals cascade across perfect countertops, marble backsplashes that could be used as a mirror to practice your smile. Our parents orbit her the way houseplants reach toward a sun lamp. When she lists accomplishments at a family dinner, my mother's eyes become glassy with pride. My father does the small, enthusiastic nod that makes me worry for his neck. It has been that way since we were children. Tessa's school projects became stage shows. Her awkward teenage bravado grew into a currency. We handed her the microphone. We still hand her the microphone, and sometimes, at midnight, I stand at the kitchen sink and wonder why I keep applauding. Which is why what happened at my parents' house on a humid Sunday should have landed like any ordinary small sting, but instead broke something quiet and long inside me. Potlucks at my mother's are performance art with chips, paper plates, those napkins that pretend to be the good ones, my father's ancient speakers playing something safe and familiar. Tessa arrived 30 minutes late, perfectly late, with cupcakes from a bakery that packages excuses in ribbons. She set them down like trophies and immediately launched into the litany of her twins' schedules: robotics club, travel soccer, and an announcement about an upcoming fundraiser that tasted of PR and dinner party talk. My mother's pupils dilated, my father's brow uncreased at the sight of anything with a trophy on it. Across the coffee table, Max and June were a blur. Max apologizing to a pebble he had dropped, and June whispering goodnight to a stray sock. And I refilled the water glasses because that is what I have always done when tension hums like a refrigerator. Then, in that bright, performative tone my mother reserves for final exam speeches, she turned to me. "So, Nora," she sang, fingers steepled as if to pocket a check, "when will your kids ever be as successful as Tessa's?" The fork I was lifting to my mouth paused halfway, suspended in the cinematic space between what we say and what we swallow. Tessa smirked at exactly the angle she uses for portrait shots. "Probably in 10 years," she said, not quite a joke, the kind of line that reads like a promise you aren't invited to. Evan's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. It was a small anchor. He has always been the kind of man who says steady things without fireworks. He squeezes, he steadies. I smiled. I made a soft noise that was an agreement and a refusal rolled into one. I did not answer in the way my chest wanted me to, loud, sharp, making an argument out of the kitchenware, because family dinners are drafty with old treaties, and I had learned that storms often cost more than they save. We drove home with the traffic lights blinking like concerned eyes. In the hush of our car, Evan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm proud of our kids." He doesn't say things like that often in public. When he does, they land like weather reports. I nodded, and then, for the first time since I was a child who hid under covers during thunderstorms, a stone formed in my chest. Not exactly anger, not quite sorrow, more a dense knowledge that a seam I had been sewing for years was finally unstitched. The truth is less dramatic than the image of a secret ledger with red ink and daggers. The truth is that generosity is a slow faucet. You think it's a dripping kindness, and then realize it has been filling someone else's bathtub for years. Tessa emailed me photos of keys once, a new house, glass glinting in the frame, and typed, "Manifested." 2 months later, she called, breathless. "We hit a snag with escrow," she said, voice small like rain on a window. Temporary, I'll pay you back. I believed her. I have always been the sibling who believes. I believed because when we were kids, she used to tuck me into her room and tell me stories during thunderstorms. I believed because families do favors and call them love. Those favors grew. Bridge became a bad metaphor when bridges turned into highways. A quiet auto transfer started, a few $100s on the 3rd of every month, and then it stretched, like everything else that's labeled temporary. I told myself it wasn't much. We trimmed groceries. We lived on library books and park afternoons. Evan and I learned to make dinner for 6 from 4 chicken breasts. We named our spreadsheet Stretch with a small, bitter joke and kept it as a talisman. Rows of expenses, columns of promises. I would check the account and smile with the sort of practiced contentment that hides the counting. When Tessa posted photos of a marble countertop that could flash people blind, my mother reacted like clockwork. Stunning, with 17 heart emojis. No private check-in. No, are you hanging on okay? Nothing. I reimbursed prescriptions for our kids and got a heart emoji in return for a photo of June with a sticker. The indignities were not sudden. They were granular. A trampoline ticket charged to our card and then a Venmo of $12 with a sparkle emoji, neat little performances that played back as generosity for one sister and expected kindness for another. That night, when the kids were asleep and the clocks in our house hummed with the kind of small, obedient time, I wrapped my hands around a lukewarm mug and looked at the wall clock I'd meant to fix for months. It ticked unevenly. The sound settled, and my mind started to count in a way that teachers do with attendance, carefully, with patience, but with a ledger in the background. I found the stretch spreadsheet, the email thread where Tessa had asked for help in a voice like a favorite song, and I started to piece together the arithmetic of our life. I did not decide in fury. I decided the way you take a breath before saying something important, deliberate and quietly resolute. The stone in my chest was a decision waiting to be spoken. But for now, on that first night after the potluck, I simply put the spreadsheet back into the drawer, closed it like a lid, and told myself I would count once more in the morning. I made a list of small things I could live without, a gentle laundry list that somehow felt like a plan. Beneath all of this, beneath the numbers and the moth-eaten sentiments, there was a quieter, less accountable thing. I loved my sister. Memory is sticky, and she once let me sleep in her room when I was 9 and terrified of storms. That makes the parting of ways messy. Love tethers, boundaries cut. Both of them are necessary. I slept badly, the fan circling like a slow accusation. In the morning, the stone was still there, but now it had edges. The story that would remake our family had not yet been told. All I had was the beginning of a sentence and a very particular resolve. I made breakfast, kissed small heads, and drove to a day of students who asked, "Will this be on the quiz?" and meant it. When people asked me later why I waited so long to act, I would have an answer that tasted like age and caution. For now, though, the story lived in the drawer of my kitchen, in the coffee ring on my mug, and in the small look Evan gave me across a table that said, without words, I'm here. Bridges are useful metaphors until they aren't. At first, what I did for Tessa felt like the sensible thing, a helping hand when someone stumbles. It started with cash for a deposit, then a curated share for a renovation, a loan for a van that took their twins to practice. There were nights she called in a voice that sounded like rain tapping a window. Temporary, Jules. I'll have a bonus. I'll fix it. Each time I believed her, partly because she used to tell me stories when I was small and scared, and partly because we are raised to believe family is a verb. You do it, even when it costs. The generosity didn't announce itself, it insinuated. I set up one small automatic transfer to help with her mortgage because the ask sounded reasonable, and because the family narrative said siblings support one another. It began as a few hundred a month, a number that could be squeezed from our budget with negotiation, and a spreadsheet called Stretch that Evan and I updated with ritual pride. I remember the first month it felt like a kindness. By the 4th year, it felt like an expected tax. The bridge I'd helped build became a private toll road that took away from our own accounts and slowly from our own margin to breathe. Evan watched the math with me. He is not sentimental in the way I am, but he invests sentiment in pragmatic steadiness. When I mentioned the auto transfer on an ordinary Tuesday, he listened, asked a few gentle questions, and said, "We can cover that if it helps your sister get steady." That was love in tax form. We adjusted. We trimmed groceries. We swapped brand names for generics. We gave up weekend getaways that had become the punctuation we used to celebrate survival. We made pasta stretch, labeled Tupperware carefully, and taught ourselves that small, intentional constraints can be a kind of joy. We called the plan temporary and named the spreadsheet in a way that made it a joke, because laughter covers many debts. But kindness is delicate when it grows invisible. Tessa learned to rely on the transfer like a background instrument. When she posted pictures of new counters or a patio that looked finished, the comments were a chorus of admiration. "Stunning," wrote our mother. Underneath, nothing, no private message asking if we were keeping up. When I paid for June's ear tube surgery, I received a heart emoji in return for a photo of her healing. Quick social gratitude for an act that cost us actual money. The pattern was not always malicious. Often it was habit. But habits compound. It was at another family lunch, the sort that arc into uncomfortable confessions, that the seam finally tore. We were planning spring events and bookings, and my mother, in a voice that had morphed into performative concern, asked aloud about our plans for the kids' activities. "We just want them to have the same opportunities," she said, as if opportunity were an assembly line we'd all agreed to stand in. Tessa smiled into her water glass the way people smile when they are arranging future applause. I put my pen down. The sentence formed in my head with a clarity that surprised me. "I'm done paying your mortgage," I said. It came out softer than I'd imagined and firmer than the air expected. The room paused, the kind of silence that organizes itself politely when a household rule is bent. My mother blinked, as if dazed. My father's mouth made an O. Tessa's expression did a quick calculus. Shock, offense, charm. "What are you talking about?" she asked, clutching at the practiced surprise of someone learning this news for the first time. I laid out the facts. The transfer had been automatic on the 3rd of every month. Over 6 years, we had contributed $82,800. The number landed like a dropped instrument. When you add up months and months of quiet generosity, it becomes something else, a habit that needs a name and a reckoning. I said, "It was temporary when we agreed. We are not at a point where temporary is still a good description." Tessa tried a dozen avenues, pleading, incredulity, the performance of wounded dignity. My mother's voice changed to that thin, church voice disappointment she keeps for when moral instruction is required. "Family doesn't do this," she said with a hiss that meant, "You are making a moral error." Evan said nothing for a long moment, then reached out and placed his hand over mine in a way that spoke both solidarity and calculation. "We have to do what's right for our 2 kids," he said simply. "Lena, no, that was a slip of memory. There is no Lena." Evan's steadiness steadied me. Confrontation is easy when it's rage. Boundary is harder when it sings with love for both sides. I wanted to avoid dramatic revenge. This was not about showing up with daggers. It was about closing a leak in the boat we were trying to row. I called the bank on Monday. The woman on the line confirmed the cancellation, the tone corporate and calm. I emailed Tessa an itemized note. Transfer canceled effective immediately, total contributed, suggestions for planning, and a line that was simple and true. "We helped for 6 years. We can't continue." My fingers hovered before I hit send. Then I did, like removing a bandage. The message was calm because I wanted to act from the place of best intentions, not petty triumph. The reaction was immediate and messy. My phone became a ringing chorus of family texture, voicemails from my mother, incredulous texts from my sister, a call from my aunt, who narrates our drama like professional sport. People tried guilt, bargaining, and nostalgia. Tessa offered a reduced monthly amount, then a plan, then screenshots of her mortgage payment as if proof of effort would absolve the years of quiet expectation. I read them all, teaching by day and checking my phone in the breaks between classes, trying to keep my answer like a hinge that opens one way, firm, non-negotiable. At some point, pride and personality duel, with the strange humor people salvage in the middle of pain, in a small, petty moment, which I confess now with a kind of embarrassed honesty. When Tessa pleaded for extra time, I typed 4 words and hit send. Wait 10 more years. It was impulsive and juvenile, a mirror of her own earlier line, and I regretted it almost immediately. But it also crystallized something. She had said, probably in 10 years, as a light brush during the potluck. Language can come back to you. The fallout was not cinematic in the way movies stage. No shouting monologues in the driveway, no last-minute forgiveness. It was voicemails and a quiet cooling from my mother that felt more like a long winter than a storm. She called me disappointed. "We sacrifice," she said, and tried to thread the narrative of upbringing into my choice as if childhood debts are a currency I owe without ledger. My father attempted the practical. You can't just stop without warning. My response was a soft sail of facts. You can. I did. I did not say it with triumph. I said it with the exhausted dignity of someone who has counted and found the math wanting. Some relatives sent private messages that were kinder. A cousin admitted they also had been quietly fronting things for years. A neighbor confessed relief that someone had finally said no. It was messy, a splintering of alliances and old roles, but it allowed light to come in where there had only been the warm but blinding lamp of expectation. In the weeks after the cancellation, I did things that felt small and monumental. Evan and I opened a new jar of an account and labeled it Future Fort. We put in $100 the first week and $50 the next when I taught a Saturday session. We started telling our children a different story about the future. It would be spared the burden of other people's deferred mortgages and instead be fed by our steady, modest savings. Max picked 3 small rocks at the local shop and paid with his own $10, which felt like a ceremony. June named her rock Kevin the way she names every dog. We ate full-price ice cream, no discounts, because sometimes dignity is cheaper than you think. Tessa's payment history became a ragged metronome. Late, on time, late. She sent me screenshots like someone training for a test, and I responded with a thumbs up when I felt like it. Once, in a quieter moment, she asked me in a flurry of defensiveness for help, setting up autopay. I spent an hour on Zoom with her, not as judge, but as someone who knows spreadsheets and how to make numbers listen. She resented the help and then, later, said thank you in a way that was embarrassed and real. It did not fix everything. Our parents' favorite conversation topic remained Tessa's twins and their trophies. Our family dinners were different, sometimes frostier, sometimes quieter, occasionally honest. I had to decide more than once that boundaries are not betrayals. I discovered that the act of saying no early often preserves the things you want to protect most. In my case, the small, sacred things that let my children build a life without carrying other people's mortgages as invisible backpacks. There were moral economies to navigate. Pride, history, shame, and the weight of memory. I did the calculations, then I lived with them. The bridge was still there to be crossed if needed, but it would no longer be an unmarked toll. Whatever Tessa's future held now required her own footsteps. The first real fracture appeared the following Sunday, not through shouting, not through some cinematic reveal, but through a bowl of soup. We'd gone to my parents' place for lunch, something we'd done nearly every weekend for years. Evan carried the dessert we'd brought, the kids ran ahead, and I stepped inside, expecting the usual, my father in his recliner pretending to nap, my mother stirring something aromatic, Tessa arriving late with twins, who hadn't learned the concept of indoor voices. But the moment we entered, the air shifted. My mother didn't say hello. She didn't hug the kids. She didn't even look at Evan. Instead, without turning around, she said, "Soup's on the table." 4 words, flat as a cutting board. Evan glanced at me, a small sideways look that asked, "Should we leave?" I shook my head once. No. Running now would make this uglier later. The table was already set, and for a second everything seemed unnervingly normal. Until Tessa walked in. She didn't take a seat. She didn't smile. She didn't even acknowledge the kids tugging at her sleeve. She stared straight at me and said, "I can't believe you actually meant it." I didn't pretend not to understand. "I do mean it. We're done paying your mortgage." Her laugh was brittle. "You must feel so proud of yourself." "I feel tired," I said. tired of pretending we can afford to fix every problem in this family while raising two kids of our own. My father cleared his throat the way he always did when he was about to choose a side, and it was never mine. "She's your sister," he said firmly. "You don't put rules on family." Evan finally spoke, calm and steady. "Rules are fine. Boundaries are fine. You just aren't used to hearing the word no from her." My mother's spoon clattered against the pot. "Evan," she snapped, "this is between the siblings." "Her finances affect me," he replied. "Our kids, our future, so yes, it's very much my business." The tension in the room tightened like a shoelace being pulled. We sat down eventually, though it felt more like a ceasefire than a meal. My mother served everyone except me. It wasn't subtle. Evan's jaw flexed once, a tiny twitch of anger, but he stayed silent. Halfway through the meal, Tessa slammed her spoon down. "So that's it? You're just walking away from us? From me?" "I'm walking away from being your bank," I said softly, "not your brother." "You're punishing my kids," she said, eyes bright with accusation. That was the sting, the line meant to wound. I set my spoon down too, very gently, because calmness has more power than volume. "No, I'm saving mine." Silence again. But this silence had teeth. Later, while helping the kids tie their shoes before we left, my mother pulled me aside. Her voice was low, almost shaking. "You've embarrassed this family," she whispered. "People help each other, especially those who have more." That part, that last part, those who have more. Something inside me clicked, like a lock turning. "Mom," I said slowly, "we don't have more. You just never asked." Her face froze. "For years we pretended everything was fine," I continued. "We skipped vacations, sold things, worked weekends, carried student loans longer than we should have, all while covering Tessa's bills. You never asked." For once, she had no response. We drove home in a quiet that wasn't sad. It was clarity settling in. Evan placed his hand on my knee as the kids slept in the back seat. "You did the right thing," he said, "even if they don't see it yet." "I know," I whispered, "but it still hurts." He nodded. "Doing the right thing usually does." The house felt lighter when we walked inside, like something uninvited had finally been evicted. The silence wasn't strained, it was unwavering. It was restful. The kind that belongs to people who no longer owe more than they can give. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to imagine a future without secretly financing someone else's life. A future that belonged to us. A future that would require courage, yes, but no more apologies. And certainly no more silent, automatic withdrawals. It took exactly 12 days for things to escalate. Not because of anger, but because of desperation. The kind that grows quietly in the dark until someone finally trips over it. It started with a message from my bank at 6:41 a.m. Unsuccessful auto withdrawal attempt, $1,150. I blinked at my phone, reread the notification, and sat up in bed. Evan stirred beside me. "Everything okay?" "They tried to pull the mortgage payment," I said, even though I already canceled the transfer. Evan pushed himself upright, awake instantly. "Who tried?" I didn't have to answer. We both knew. Tessa hadn't accepted the boundary. She'd simply tried to route around it. But that wasn't even the part that made my stomach turn. A second notification arrived. Unsuccessful attempt. $350. Then another. 5 in total. Each attempt a different amount. Like she was testing how low she could go before one slipped through. Evan exhaled slowly. "She's using your old saved account info." "Or she gave it to her bank," I said, numb. "She knew it wouldn't work," he said softly. "But she tried anyway." It was a sentence that landed like a bruise. By 8 a.m., my phone started buzzing. First my mother, then my father, then Tessa again, and then my mother again. Evan took the phone gently from my hand, turned it face down, and set it on my nightstand. "You don't owe them your panic," he said. "Not anymore." But the thing about boundaries, once you draw them, some people treat the line like a challenge. They didn't wait long. At 9:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. The kids were still in pajamas, Evan was making coffee, and I was trying to gather myself when I looked through the peephole. My parents and Tessa, all standing on my porch, as if this were an intervention. Evan met my eyes. "Do you want to open it?" "I have to." He stepped closer. "You don't have to face anything alone." That helped, but only a little. The moment the door opened, the accusations started without breath or punctuation. My mother, "You humiliated your sister. You embarrassed us in front of the bank. You've always been selfish." My father, "You should have discussed this with us. You know she's struggling. This is not how family behaves." Tessa, I can't believe you'd do this to me. You're ruining my credit. My kids are going to suffer because of your ego. You owe me a warning, or time, or something." The words crashed together like hail. The kids stood at the top of the stairs watching, their small faces tight with confusion. Evan moved them into the living room quietly. I finally held up a hand. "Enough." My voice was low, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "You showed up uninvited," I said. "You tried to take money from our account after I canceled the transfers. You crossed a line." Tessa scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "You attempted 5 withdrawals," I said. "That's not drama. That's desperation." Her face flickered. Shame, panic, anger, all in the space of a heartbeat. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice as if the neighbors might hear. "You don't talk to your sister like that." "Yes," I replied. "Actually, I do, because for 6 years I paid her bills while raising 2 kids." "We didn't ask you to," my father said. "You didn't ask anything," I shot back. "You just expected." The silence this time wasn't shocked. It was exposed. Raw. Something no one could pretend not to hear. Then Tessa did the thing that truly broke the last remaining thread. She said in a trembling, venom-soft voice, "Well, if your kids ever need help, don't expect me to be there." The words hung in the air. My kids, who were listening. My family, who pretended that was normal. My heart, which snapped. Evan stepped forward before I could speak. "You won't need to worry about our kids," he said. His tone was quiet, but lethal. "Because unlike you, we don't expect other people to raise or fund them." Tessa turned red. My father pointed a finger at Evan. "Watch your tone." Evan didn't flinch. "You came to our home, yelling, accusing, trying to guilt my partner back into debt." He paused. "That's not family. That's manipulation." My mother's eyes widened, offended that someone finally said it out loud. I took a breath, a long, steady breath that felt like stepping into a future I should have chosen years ago. "Go home," I said. "We're not leaving until," my father began. I repeated, "Go home." The firmness in my voice shocked even me. Tessa stared at me, waiting for the usual, the apology, the softening, the compromise. I didn't give it. Not this time, not ever again. Eventually they turned, walked down the porch steps, left without another word. The door clicked shut. The house exhaled, and so did I. Evan wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You did it," he murmured. "You finally did it." I didn't cry, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the weight leaving my body all at once. Because the truth settled in, clean and undeniable. Sometimes the first person you must protect your children from is your own family. The turning point didn't arrive as an apology. It arrived as a consequence none of us expected, not even Tessa. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence from my parents. 3 weeks without a single guilt-laced message. 3 weeks where no one tried to twist my boundaries back into obligations. It felt unnatural at first, quiet in places that used to echo, too quiet. But then life steadied. The kids laughed more, Evan slept deeper, and I began to breathe again without guilt sitting on my chest. For the first time in years, the money we earned stayed in our account. We paid our bills early. We stocked the fridge without calculating. We even started talking about a weekend trip, something we hadn't done in ages. But peace never lasts long in a family built on imbalance. The storm came on a Wednesday evening. Evan was bathing the kids when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, then another, then 5 more. All identical. "Call me, it's an emergency." At first I thought it was a scam, but then a 7th message arrived, this time with a photo attached, and my stomach dropped. It was Tessa, sitting on a curb outside what looked like a bank, mascara smeared, hands shaking, face pale in a way that wasn't theatrical, but terrified. Before I could respond, the phone rang. "Unknown number again," I answered. "Nora?" Her voice was raw, thin, shredded. "It's me." I clenched the phone. What happened? There was a long, shaky inhale. The bank froze my accounts. My heartbeat thudded. What? Why? They flagged the repeated withdrawal attempts, and the overdraft, and the late payments. Her breath hitched. "And my landlord is threatening eviction. I don't have anyone else to call." That last sentence wasn't guilt. It wasn't manipulation. It was truth, a truth she wasn't used to tasting. Evan stepped into the hall just then, towel over his shoulder, kids giggling in the bathroom behind him. He read my expression instantly. "What's wrong?" he mouthed. I didn't answer. "Not yet," because Tessa continued, her voice trembling harder. "Mom and Dad said I put myself in this mess. They won't help me anymore." A short, broken laugh. "They actually said I should learn responsibility." The irony slammed into me. My parents, suddenly supporters of accountability, only after their favorite child desperately needed something they couldn't give? Her voice cracked. I can't pay rent, Jules. A pause. I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. And that's when it hit me. The real reason my parents always sided with her. Not because she was younger, not because she was fragile, not because she had kids, but because supporting her gave them power. Power they never felt over me. Because I was self-sufficient, stable, responsible, predictable. Helping me offered them nothing to control, but helping Tessa, that made them needed, essential, relevant. I was the child they didn't have to worry about. She was the child they needed to worry about, which made them feel important. And now, suddenly, even they were done with her. That realization felt like stepping out of a fog I didn't know I was in. Nora, Tessa whispered, please, please don't hang up. I closed my eyes. Not in anger, not in pity, in grief. Because this, all of it, was the price of years spent pretending that enabling someone was love. I finally spoke. Tessa, I said quietly, I'm not letting you become homeless. A soft sob escaped her. But, I continued, I'm not rescuing you either. There was a stunned silence. I felt Evan's hand slide into mine, warm, steady. You need a plan, I said, a real one, not a bandage. I don't know how, she whispered. I'll help you figure it out, I said. But I won't pay your way anymore. That part of our relationship is over. She didn't argue. Not this time. She just cried. The kind of crying someone does when their old life collapses and a new one hasn't formed yet. After I hung up, Evan wrapped his arms around me. You handled that perfectly, he murmured. I wasn't sure. Not yet. Because helping someone grow is harder and far scarier than helping someone depend on you. But the truth was simple. Tessa didn't need money. She needed a mirror. And I finally had the strength to hold one up.